Hello, welcome to Vibration Cinema, the Alter Destiny of Film. Today, we are picking up from an earlier episode, Hollywood and Cultural Imperialism, where we looked at how Hollywood jockeys for market domination across the globe. This episode focuses on the domestic market, specifically how Hollywood, as a self-regulating industry, uses censorship and regulation to squeeze out competition, notably from independent producers and non-Hollywood produced or distributed foreign films. We'll also look at how a byproduct of this market domination, coupled with the Ford factory industrialization of Hollywood, captures audiences and manufactures taste. Check out the description for a history of early censorship and how Hollywood navigated state censorship until film gained First Amendment protections, allowing Hollywood to become a self-regulating industry thereafter. A thrilling tale involving Catholic freaks, Italian icon Anna Magnani, race riots in the Supreme Court. Our story is about Hollywood's use of regulation as market control, so we start after this period in the 1960s. Another Catholic freak, and I'm overemphasizing this point because you know how people get with a certain religion controlling Hollywood.
I'm not going to say what race, what people, and what media went to. We know I can't say that.
It's Catholics. Guys, you're mad at Catholics. Jack Valenti headed the MPAA from 1966 to 2004. We learned about him in Hollywood and Cultural Imperialism because of his work using American so-called soft power to force film markets abroad to bend to Hollywood demand. Because of the Miracle Decision in 1952 and the more liberalized freewheeling morality of America in the 60s, the antiquated production code was phased out in favor of the MPAA's own rating board in 1968. The MPAA, representing Hollywood studios, essentially gained censorial control over the American film market, and boy have they abused it. In perhaps the corniest documentary ever made, this film is not yet rated, Jack Kirby roadmaps how Hollywood uses this self-regulatory power to decrease the market viability of indie films of course being a space where women, queer, and black filmmakers thrive. With few exceptions, NC-17, formerly known as X, is a death sentence because exhibitors can't sell tickets to minors regardless of parental consent. The MPAA will rate Hollywood films lower than an indie film with similar content. A Hollywood PG-13 would be an indie R, a Hollywood R becomes an indie NC-17. Naturally, a distributor can forego a rating from the MPAA. This is what Kirby did, but that is another guaranteed way to not get a film on enough screens to be profitable, as major chain theaters won't screen the film because of the loss in ticket revenue. It's a free market choice in the way that one is encouraged to take a raw deal with a gun to their head, so most films, and indie films included, go through the MPAA rating board. The MPAA is notoriously vague about what needs to be changed in order to decrease a rating. This obscurant tactic not only exempts them from claims of censorship, but also renders any logical scrutiny of their decisions useless. This rating board is a form of corporate censorship, something Edward S. Herman might call an aspect of a propaganda model. This corporate crime syndicate that we call Hollywood uses its market domination to censor what we are allowed to see, how we are allowed to see it, and when. The MPAA regulatory board is the most explicit example of this corporate censorship, but I want to cover more subtler ways that this happens.
Because in the world we live in the system we've created for ourselves in terms of it's a big industry, you cannot lose money. The point is that you're forced to make a particular kind of movie. You have to adhere to a very narrow line of commercialism.
Despite what you may think, America is not some pluralistic melting pot of various racial, ethnic, religious, and gendered identities. People living in the good old US of A don't even have a national identity. No, the only thing that exists in America are consumers. Freedom is consumption, a disease infecting all Americans. If you aren't consuming, you are dead. The more you consume, the more you are alive. The more options you have to consume, the more you are free.
The revolution will not be televised.
Girl, shut the fuck up. You thought you ate that? Bitch,
In the realm of media consumption, we seem to be super free. An uncountable amount of cable channels, thousands of Hollywood movies and TV shows, a growing list of streamers, and so forth. But of course, this is all an illusion. It's really only 6 companies, down from about 50 in the 1980s, that own these channels and media, begging the question, how free are we really? Hollywood uses capitalism to hold the market hostage to proliferate its products. How it controls film education, production, distribution, and exhibition channels holds you hostage, forcing its niche way of doing things down your throat, confusing you into thinking that this is natural and inevitable.
Controlling exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Precisely because its market domination allows for it to filter out any non-Hollywood films from getting to screens. This is corporate censorship, and
you're a victim.
The effects of this phenomenon, which flattens our understanding of what film was, is, and can be, is what I call common sense filmmaking, our reflexive understanding of cinema. When people say, well, audiences want this kind of cinema, what they fail to account for is how Hollywood is largely dictating your tastes by restricting access to other forms of cinema, including American American cinema and oversaturating audiences basically Clockwork Orange style with their own slop. In his 1947 essay, The Public Opinion Myth, from 77 years ago, making this observation a year older than isn't real, Ernest Bornemann likens this phenomenon to, quote, a physician who has discovered a latent drug addiction among a number of his patients. Instead of trying to heal it, he sells his professionally gained knowledge to a drug manufacturer who, in turn, keeps the doctor on his payroll to build up the latent addiction into a permanent drug habit among his patients. Challenged on the ethics of his procedure, the outraged doctor says, "Why, I've only given the people what they wanted. Is this a democracy or isn't it?" End quote. When an industry monopolizes, it gets to determine how the market moves, and consumers are forced to adjust. Price leadership, shrinkflation, planned obsolescence are examples you might be familiar with. In entertainment media, the manufacturing of taste not only is a matter of market capture, but also of censorship. A lot of the complaints that people have about how Hollywood films look are the visual signifiers of this business model. In his 2000 book, Movie Wars: How Hollywood and the Media Limit What Movies We Can See, Jonathan Rosenbaum details various processes Hollywood uses to censor and regulate film criticism and distribution. Rosenbaum recounts a Wall Street Journal article, which I can't track down because their archive seemingly ends in 1977, entitled "Film Flam, Movie Research Kingpin is Accused by Former Employees of Selling Manipulated Data," from the December 17, 1993 edition, wherein the ex-National Research Group Incorporated employees and officials admitted to manipulating audience testing data to favor the outcome studios expected for their movies, a clear example of manufacturing taste. But this isn't the only way that taste is made. For example, in the recent article Who Needs Film Critics, exposed a trend of Hollywood producers inviting more influencers to film screenings than film critics because Hollywood wants to control the hype or potential disinterest in a film. But as Rosenbaum points out 24 years ago in his book, this has always been a part of the infrastructure of film criticism. Publicists have a history of inviting corporate shill types to pre-screenings as an example. Editors working for entertainment rags or prestige publications want their writers to have access to more than just advanced screenings. Interviewing the stars of these big movies drives more readership to their mag. Publicists weaponize this access to control what is said about a particular film. Precious ink and space dictate which movies can even get talked about and for how long. A great indie debut or non-American feature or a revival might be playing near you and you wouldn't have any clue because the invisible hand says that no one will read about it, which fuels a self-fulfilling prophecy that no one will watch those kinds of films because nobody even knows about them. And the dying economy of entertainment journalism can't risk not running stories that appeal to a broader, already manufactured base, leaving non-Hollywood films in the shadow. Theaters and distributors are also part of this, of course. 2 years ago, we saw the memes about how many screens were colonized by Dr. Strangelove and How I Learned to Hate the Multiverse, which hampered the success of the indie-produced cultural phenomenon, everything all over the place all the goddamn time. Annapurna backed the Dick Cheney movie during the 2018 award season, so it hit every screen, leaving Beale Street to die, like on 10 screens nationwide, even though Beale Street had a higher per-screen average. If they literally just put a billboard of Regina King in black neighborhoods, it would have been like free money. Infamously, the independent of the majors Weinstein Company produced Hateful Eight had a 70mm screening at the Cinerama Dome, which is one screen, but Disney pulled a block booking move against the then Cinerama Dome owner ArcLight to force them to pull the Tarantino flick in favor of their on every other screen in the goddamn world Star Wars the next movie. Speaking of the Weinsteins in Disney, did you know the Mouse used to own that sex criminal's old independent company, Miramax, until 2010? And did you know that the reason the Weinsteins bought up so many independent and foreign films that they let die on a single screen release was to prevent other companies from distributing those movies to potentially compete with their runs? But free market, am I right? And of course, a lot of the films that Weinstein did distribute were hacked away by the sex pest to make them better, more palatable to American idiots. Hayao Miyazaki and Bong Joon-ho respectively threatened and gaslit him out of recutting their movies. My point is that all these tactics create artificial taste. By restricting what people see to only what Hollywood produces, the industry creates a palette for what they make readily available, not what is good or interesting. It's an oligarchy, well, when Disney decides to play nice, controlling the market. Hollywood films are Ford factory produced because it breeds familiarity. And it's reinforced with every Hollywood film that you see, so that in the rare instance you stumble across something off the beaten path, the experience is so alienating and uncomfortable you retreat back to the straight and narrow. Despite the Hollywood standard, America has surprisingly one of the healthiest cinematic canons, the National Film Registry. There are many forms of motion pictures represented, like music videos, home movies, ethnographies, and student films. Of course, Hollywood has an outside presence, but the registry surveys the breadth of American cinema well enough. Hollywood has made itself synonymous with American cinema, which makes our canon seem kind of lame, not gonna lie, when it's so much more interesting outside of Hollywood. Collectives like Chamba Productions, who were doing educational documentaries on public access television, is American cinema. The LA Rebellion, participants of which taught me, is American cinema. AIDS Video Activism, who we covered previously, are American cinema. Topaz, one of the illegal home movies made inside the eponymous Japanese internment camp, is American cinema. Indigenous cinema is American cinema, and so on and so on. Kagaganda did a video essay on the differences between how how DeSica cut Terminal Station and how El Selznick cut it that exemplifies my major point. These seemingly minor decisions actually force movies to conform within a narrowly defined aesthetic that Hollywood created. Recutting Indian foreign films to fit this paradigm tricks American audiences into believing that across the globe and outside Hollywood there is a common cinematic language. This is one of the ways that the Hollywood standard becomes ubiquitous, another manifestation of Hollywood's cultural imperialism. That is, of course, for the films that even get a wide enough release in America. We can't forget how Hollywood tries to keep non-Hollywood films off the screens anyway, which is again another tactic that makes Hollywood's ubiquity seem natural. But there are really intangible ways Hollywood makes its product familiar while anything else reviled. The negative reaction over digital and streaming are good examples. To Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tortellini, who grew up watching 35mm, who learned and worked on 35mm, of course digital looks weird to them and feels subpar.
To me, the magic of movies is connected to 35mm.
But if you are around my age, then you don't have a consistent visual paradigm. I saw the debates between DVD and Laserdisc, full screen and widescreen, Blu-ray and HD DVD, the early days of 1080p streaming, the switch from analog to digital television, and the beginning of digital projection, all before I was 18. Comes out when I'm in high school. I have no affinity for format because a new one came out every couple of years. But the point is, because 35mm has been the standard format for over 100 years, of course it breeds familiarity and nostalgia, the fetishization of the projector purring and so forth. That doesn't equate as a moniker of a film's artistic quality. It's mostly a marker of how the industry operates to produce cookie-cutter bullshit. Few other countries can even produce or buy 35mm. We saw in Hollywood and Cultural Imperialism how Hollywood restricts access to 35mm if countries don't bend to its imperial demands, killing off those film industries. A lot of non-Hollywood films were shot either on 8, 16, or tape, formats that are considered inferior, which furthers the self-fulfilling prophecy that Hollywood is better because it looks better, so why bother watching these so-called lesser films, even the ones who have superior writing, acting, and more imaginative images. Capitalist calculations of theatrical showings dictate when and for how long you have access to a movie. Physical media mitigated this to an extent despite its flaws. I had VHSs before I was born. There's not a day in my life where I haven't owned a movie or a time when I couldn't watch a movie whenever I wanted, bedtime notwithstanding, but even then I rode that volume button like a motherfucker. Streaming gives studios back control in a sense because they can pull access at any point, even pulling films before they hit the market for tax write-offs, another step in the financialization of cinema. Regardless of old Hollywood's oligarchic structure, they were selling products, not shares, another business decision expressed aesthetically. The remote control gave consumers a level of authorial control over film as well. It loosened the grip Hollywood had over consumers. You can control the volume, color saturation, aspect ratios, contrast, motion smoothing, pan and scan, often by accident. I cannot count how many times I've had to fix my aunt's TV because the picture's not right. You can even edit a film in a sense. As a kid, I fast forwarded past that lame ass snow crap in Empire Strikes Back, effectively cutting out the first 45 minutes of that movie. The panic over declining theater numbers because of VHS didn't work in the 1980s because it was 30 years too late with the advent of TV. So, I mean, crying over streaming, that ship has sailed several times over in 70-ish years, which isn't to glorify streaming, but to put the complaint aging Hollywood directors levy into context. The industry's concern about these new forms engaging with cinema speak to its loss of control. These idiots didn't diversify their industry and let TV manufacturers and tech bros run training. Even film schools are part of this problem. They're either ran by Hollywood shills or they have incentives to conform to the Hollywood standards so that they can advertise all of their successful students who do well in the system. Film school isn't for artistic development, it is to produce good little factory line workers. Even film studies simultaneously orientalizes non-Hollywood cinema while also bringing it to heel to the Hollywood standard. In the Western Academy, Ozu, for example, is simultaneously the most Japanese of all Japan's directors and a master of the Western cinematic spatial design in his alleged negation of it. Hollywood uses these distortions of cinema by capitalism to naturalize itself as an inevitability, but we can point fairly easily to decisions made by one person or one company who codified 24 frames per second, 35mm, feature-length film minimums, and so forth. That's how close in history we are to cinema's birth. If Thomas Edison slipped and busted his head open, for example, cinema would be very, very different. Film history, as told by Hollywood, is held together by a band-aid and some gum. Censorship is often talked about as state oppression to quash political opposition, to create obedience to good government policy. But Hollywood engages in censorship as corporate oppression to quash market competition to bolster its profits. Censorship of this kind is not content moderation, though that does manifest itself in such a model. Hollywood has monopolized the film industry. It is a matter of market control which prevents competition. As we saw in Hollywood and Cultural Imperialism, Hollywood uses US diplomacy to game the international box office, and here domestically through the MPAA and oligarchic control of production, distribution, exhibition, and education. Hollywood controls how we even think about cinema. As I hinted throughout this episode, imperialism destroys the world, but also rots the core. Brother Malcolm has a line on this, something about chickens and roosting. Well, that's it for this episode. Love you all madly. See you on the next one.